alive, as he was telling me this, and he would question the guy, and the guy was, he only spoke Spanish, and so he'd talk to him, and then he'd translate for me, and then he'd go back and ask a question that I had, and and so I was telling Keel about this, and he says, "Wow, thanks." And I said, "That's some story there." And but he had told me that in his investigations, after a few years, he just kind of burned out on winged creatures, because he said Mothman was just one of many from all over the world that cases where these things have been reported.
Well, they also, you mentioned like Arizona, but in the desert, there's been sightings of like man-like creatures with wings, pretty much what you're describing about Mothman being sighted.
Yeah, and they've had things similar to over in Russia. I remember, I think it was Paul Stonehill, who was originally born in Russia, now he's in America, wrote an article for Fate magazine about similar incidents over there. And, I know that Albert Rosales, who's from Cuba originally, he sent me stories from Cuba going back into the 1940s or 30s of winged beings being seen by different people.
Well,
so
well, you know what?
It's a global thing.
Yeah, well, I now know too who the writers kind of like, it made the couple of the movies, Jeepers Creepers 1, Jeepers Creepers 2, and 3. Hey, I know where they got their whole plot from now. It does.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've thought about that movie. Yeah,
it fits in pretty much the same thing. I mean, kind of human looking, but the only difference is that creature managed to drive an old van type of thing, and stalked its victims. But I mean, naturally, they have to, beef it up. But somebody probably heard the legend about the Mothman, and that's how Jeepers Creepers probably was came about.
Yeah, I've always I kind of wonder about some of these things. I wonder about Stephen King and where he, I know he's got to be doing some reading like Chris Carter did for the X-Files, taking some what he reads and then incorporating it into different storylines, and you wonder, do some of these people kind of believe some of this? What are their thoughts? Have they ever had any experiences, or some of the family members or whatever, or is it all just for the money,
I don't know. Now, I'm having people asking me now, black-eyed children.
Yeah. Years ago, I didn't, you heard of the grays and the black eyes. I hadn't really, and I guess maybe they're suspected to be like hybrids or something. But I don't know. I haven't had much dealing with through the years with the black-eyed children. That's kind of for me, a more recent thing that's been coming up.
Yeah. Supposedly a couple of the cases that I remember about is like where the lady was getting into her car at the mall, late at night, and two children approached her car. Actually, it was a guy, I believe, approached the car and said they wanted a ride. And the guy looked at him, and first thing he noticed, that the eyes were like black instead of white. And they kept asking to get in the car and, demanding that he let him in the car. Well, he ended up taking off, and that was the end of it. And then there's been cases where they've come up to people, in rural areas, up to the people's door, banging on the door. The people go to answer the door, and they always, it seemed like they ask the question, "Can I come in? Can we come in?" They have to be invited.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've read that too. It made me think of the old vampire movies and stuff. They want permission to come in or something.
Well, demons might have to. That's what I was talking to you about. You have to be careful, like with the ghost box, because one of my good guests has been on my show a couple of times. She's a psychic, and she would go with a priest, and they would go and cleanse the house, and the priest would do his thing, to try to remove whatever, evil entity was in, the person. She actually had one, I guess, that followed her home, And it was really hard, she said, to get rid of it. And it was to the point where it was physically hurting her. And her boyfriend at one point was looking at her like, hey, you're getting strange here. Why are you scratching yourself? Why are you cutting yourself? And she goes, I'm not. And I actually had him and her on the show the last time. And she would say, well, right in front of him, all of a sudden he noticed a scratch was appearing and it was bleeding. And that would be one thing, if you maybe ask the wrong type of questions, you could invite somebody into your house you don't want, or not maybe so much in your house, in your life.
Yeah. I know someone asked me one time on a show that we did that I did with somebody that listened to some of the audio that I had and during the show, and he says, doesn't that just creep you out? And I said, for some reason it never did. Neither me or my wife or my daughter, who's in her 30s, and I know some people call the ghost box the electronic Ouija board, but it never really bothered us like that. I mean, it was, I don't know if it's because it was voices on the radio, and sometimes we didn't really know what we got until we actually reviewed the audio. I mean, we've had times we'd hear it quite clearly, and then sometimes in the review process we'd pick up things that we weren't even aware of at the time. But and sometimes, I got to admit, I remember reading a book on EVPs that was published back in the 70s, called Voices of the Dead by Mary. I think it was Mary. What was her last name? She had written a number of books on the paranormal. It's getting old is bad.
Tell me about it.
Anyway, in this book it talked about EVPs where there is bad language, and we've experienced that too, where they come out with they seemingly talking with us, and use the F-bomb there on us, and it's like, okay, well, we know that didn't come through the radio, and in fact, I know Brett Little had presented some of that to people to say, look, I got this, you can hear it, and got it through a radio, so tell me that's not a little suspicious. But
yeah, I find it interesting. Now, what do you, I had Stephen Bassett on my show here several weeks back. He feels that the government is almost to the point where they're going to, let the American public know that, UFOs do exist, and we have been, and we are being visited by UFOs. Do you really think that might happen within the next year or so?
Well, I've been in this field since about January '67, and I did get interested during the wave of March of '66, but I didn't actually decide to, start investigating, researching, collecting, information until after I read Frank Ibbott's Flying Saucer Serious Business. So at age 14, I started in the field, and all that time, I keep hearing people saying that they think the government may be about to release the big information, and there's been files released in different countries, that were formerly kept, secret, but not the kind of big announcement, that everybody's waiting with bated breath, that, hey, we have this crash saucer with the pickled alien bodies. We keep hearing stories from people, but it's never anything that we've, been able to, nobody's actually from official sources come forward and saying, okay, we got it, here it is, come take some pictures, but hopefully that day, may arrive if they do have that in their possession. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I hope that more information will come out, and we'll know something more than we do.
Well, I'd like to follow up on that with Brent, because I would really love to hear your impression about the New York Times article, that came out last December from the Department of Defense and the Pentagon officials actually confirming the existence of UFOs. That was kind of a big disclosure at that point. And what I'm finding out is that, the American public just kind of like wasn't that impressed at that point. Although there was some gun camera footage from the FA-18 jets off of the Nimitz aircraft carrier. So I'm just wondering what your opinion would be about this kind of what I call soft disclosure.
Yeah, I know that it's encouraging and interesting, and I'm following it with everybody else. I know that I know some people that are actually talking to or communicating with some of these witnesses from that the incident you're describing, and this could be, in the long run, as the investigation continues, this could provide some really, really solid evidence, and hopefully it'll lead to more. I keep hearing, about Bigelow and about some kind of physical evidence that they have, and I know a lot of the physical evidence turns out to be inconclusive, but if they've got something that would be conclusive, that would be truly anomalous, I hope that pretty soon that'll come out. That would be quite intriguing.
Exactly.
That'd be worth getting on the plane and going out to Las Vegas to check out.
Yeah. Matter of fact, the New York Times, probably the most earth-shattering aspect of the New York Times article was the mention of the idea that Bob Bigelow out there in Las Vegas, the billionaire who was working with the federal government in space travel and those kinds of things, had actually been given, or probably by the government, some what they call metamaterials. They didn't call it downcraft or a UFO, but the fact that they were studying these metamaterials that seem to have been constructed by layers and layers of actual molecules. They're kind of like laid down layer by layer. But the interesting part of that metamaterial that I just went nuts over was the fact that they said this material seems to affect human physiology in some manner. And of course that would really kind of bring to the fore of what we've heard before.
Right, that was fascinating. I wondered if that was just, what I had read. I just wondered if that was just certain people maybe that were sensitive to certain things, or if that was anybody that, would be exposed to it.
Yes.
I wasn't sure. I'd be real interested to hear more information on that metamaterial, and see where that takes us.
Well, boy, I would be too, because, today, again, when I was talking to the scientists at the UW, they were talking about, they feel that some of these spacecraft that, that are being spotted or whatever, that the material is organic. And that's how they're able to do some of the things that is being done out there that in capability. So I don't know how you both feel about that. Do you believe that maybe these alien UFOs are organic in nature?
Well, Gary, let me jump right in here, because that would really follow with the theory that these craft are either organic or biological, but they definitely seem to have be controlled by the operator's mind itself. So there is some kind of a communication with the vehicle and the pilots. And if indeed the vehicles made out of this metamaterial are able to respond to thoughts and or intentions of the pilot, it would follow that this metamaterial that they're studying at Bigelow's facility in Las Vegas might have some of that latent ability to affect human physiology just because of that.
That is interesting.
Yeah. And I'll add, that I know John Keel